Well, good day. It is the 20th already of July 2021, kind of a hot and hazy day here in Virginia. Most of you know, obviously, the DEA does undercover buys of drugs. No big surprise. What many of you don't know is that for decades, the DEA has been operating a program that's called the Domestic Monitor Program. And what the DMP, or the Domestic Monitor Program, is intended to do is we buy heroin on the street level. So it's not targeting major drug traffickers. It's not being purchased as evidence for prosecution. What it is a case or a situation, a program where agents will go out, make an undercover buy without making an arrest, submit the heroin to the special laboratory, the DEA special laboratory, where they test the heroin to determine its purity, its cost, and the place of origin, which can be determined by a signature. So I'm going to do a little presentation on that, and then I'm going to come back and talk about it. Well, as I said in the intro, this is on the DEA Domestic Monitor Program, why it was created and what it shows. And again, it was established way back machine in the 1980s. We wanted to determine the purity, the origin, and the price of junkie heroin, which is, heroin that's bought on the street. What goes into the arms of the users. So obviously the usual DEA approach is to interdict, to disrupt the highest levels of drug trafficking. Here we just want to see what's on the street. And what happens is you make your quarterly DMP buys without making arrests. You just go to open marketplaces in cities, usually at 0:30 in the morning, and it's sent to the special testing lab where info is provided to DEA Intel, which provides a report. This is the cleanest I've ever seen this place. We used to do this at 0:30. This was one of our famous places. This is another one, Sursum Corda housing project. I don't know what happened to all the folks. Must be because of COVID or something, but usually there's all kinds of people standing around here. You go about 5 in the morning. For whatever reason, that's when they all want to get their fix for the day, and you make the buys and submit it to the lab. And here's what we've found. As time has gone on, the origin is primarily from Mexico, and the percentage of the exhibits purchased are primarily from Mexico. As a matter of fact, overwhelmingly so. And what you've seen, and this only goes up to 2016, but it's, because the ones that they publish for public use, which is what I can use right now, are what's available. But you're seeing that the purity is steadily going up and that the price is going down. Bad news. Now, what else does this show? When we look at it, overdose deaths are increasing to over 90,000 in 2020, all the way up from about half of that in 2014. And most of the heroin in the United States comes from our friendly neighbor to the south in Mexico. And of course, a lot of unlawful immigration is coming from Mexico as well. And surprisingly, and I guess it shouldn't be surprisingly, the vast majority of the heroin in the world not going into the U.S., but 95% comes from Afghanistan. And really, it was at about 0% of the heroin in the world coming from Afghanistan back in 2000, to where 95% is now coming from Afghanistan after 20 years of U.S. military occupation. Go figure. So despite massive aid to Mexico and billions in a military occupation in Afghanistan, our country has been flooded with heroin. Now, what does this tell us? Well, it tells us, in my mind anyway, that our strategy is bankrupt. Using a conventional military force to fight an insurgency didn't work in Vietnam, and it's not working. It didn't work in Afghanistan. I heard this morning they're processing visas of thousands of Afghans to come to the United States in anticipation of the collapse of the so-called democratic government, to the one-eyed Mullah Omar, who was somehow surprisingly like the Roadrunner on the old cartoon, survived 20 years of U.S. Fighting against them. And Mexico, which is again, run by various cartels. It's a failed state. And our response to the failed state is to allow people to cross the border with basic impunity. And there you have it. I mean, what you see is that it's one of the few government programs that actually works, and that it shows what it is intended to do. It does what it's intended to do. And what it's showing is that heroin is more plentiful than ever on our streets, that the purity has gone up and the price has gone down, and that Mexico is now the major source of heroin. Now, that is unusual with regards to the rest of the world, because in the rest of the world, it's Afghanistan that is the source of heroin. Now, Mexico, of course, is right on our border, and we've had Afghanistan under military occupation for 20 years. So, obviously, there are things that we are doing or not doing with regards to our approach that have failed, that have miserably failed. Number one, to convince the Mexican government to take strong action against its traffickers. Number two, to influence the Afghan government at all. It's about to collapse now and fall to the Taliban. I'm going to do a video on Afghanistan shortly, but one of the sad things I heard on the radio this morning is they're already beginning to process visas for Afghans to come to the United States in anticipation of the fall of Afghanistan. Very sad when you consider the thousands of Americans who've been killed, many thousands more who've been blown up, lost limbs, and essentially it's almost like the same playbook that we used in Vietnam. A highly mechanized military to go after an insurgent group, and it failed. It failed. So it failed then, it failed now, and those who don't, now initially, when we initially made our invasion back in 2001, it was done with special forces, Green Berets, and Afghan tribal groups, and it worked well. But then somebody got the bright idea, let's turn it into another New Hampshire. Let's rebuild the country in our image. And that failed miserably. The people didn't want what we were selling, and we found that one out the hard way. And not just the hard way with loss of blood, but the loss of so much money. I mean, incalculable amount of money. So at any rate, if you are assigned to the DEA, you join the DEA, you'll be assigned without a doubt to go out and do these buys. When my group, we would have to do them, we would go out to particular areas in the Washington, D.C. area at 0 dark 30, when the addicts begin wanting their drugs, and you make the buys and then submit it to the lab. And it's kind of a hey you detail, but it's a necessary thing, so it's but again, bad news on the drug front. Or whatever it is we're doing isn't working. So at any rate, thank you for the comments on the Marshals video. I check USA Jobs every day. Again, if you have a resume, please submit it to me and I will take a look at it. Thank you and have a good day.